What would you do if your family forced you into assisted living, cleaned out your house without permission, and sold everything you owned at a garage sale for $37 total, not knowing that what they called worthless hoarder trash was actually a $2.3 million antique collection? Would you call them immediately? Forgive them? Or would you do what I did? Let them celebrate their successful cleanup, while a professional appraiser documented every piece they'd illegally sold, preparing to show them the true cost of treating family like garbage. I was 72 years old, living alone in the house my husband Robert and I had bought 47 years ago, a beautiful 3-story Victorian in Portland, Oregon, with an attic full of carefully preserved collections and a basement workshop where Robert had spent decades restoring antique furniture. After he died 8 years ago, I'd kept everything exactly as he'd left it, not because I was stuck in the past, but because I was a curator of our shared history. Every item had a story. Every piece had meaning. But my son Marcus and his wife Diane didn't see stories. They saw clutter. The fall happened on a Tuesday morning. I was carrying a box of winter clothes down from the attic. Perfectly capable, perfectly stable, when the light bulb in the stairwell burned out. I missed the last step in the darkness, twisted my ankle, and landed hard on the second-floor landing. Nothing broken, just a sprain. I called Marcus, not because I needed rescue, but because I needed someone to pick up a prescription brace from the pharmacy. He arrived with Diane 40 minutes later. I was sitting on the couch with my foot elevated, ice pack in place exactly as the urgent care doctor had instructed over a phone consultation. I was fine, annoyed, embarrassed, but fine. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Marcus said, not even asking how I was feeling. He was already walking through my living room, picking up items, and setting them down with exaggerated care, like he was navigating a minefield. "Look at this place. You can barely move without tripping over something." "I didn't trip over anything," I corrected. The light burned out. "Because you couldn't reach it to change it," Diane interjected, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. She'd always had that posture around me, defensive, judgmental, like I was a problem she'd been forced to inherit through marriage. "Betty, you're going to hurt yourself seriously one of these days. This house is too big. There's too much stuff." Stuff. She said it with such disdain, like my belongings were offensive to her just by existing. "I'm managing perfectly well," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though I could feel my blood pressure rising. "I've lived in this house for nearly 50 years. One twisted ankle doesn't mean I need to abandon my home." Marcus sat down across from me, and I recognized that look. It was the same expression he'd had as a teenager when he'd already made a decision and was just going through the motions of pretending to consult me. "Mom, we've been talking, Diane and I. We think it's time to consider other options." "What kind of options?" "Assisted living. There's a beautiful facility in Beaverton. We toured it last month. They have activities, medical staff on site, meals included." "You toured it last month?" I interrupted. "Before I even fell? You've been planning this?" Diane stepped forward, her voice taking on that false sweet tone that made my skin crawl. "We just want what's best for you, Betty. You're not getting any younger. And let's be honest, you've been isolated here, surrounding yourself with all these collections. It's not healthy." Collections. The way she said it made it sound like a psychological disorder. Not the careful curation of a lifetime, not the preservation of family history, not the valuable antiques my father had spent decades acquiring. Just collections. A problem to be solved. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "This is my house, my home, and I'm perfectly capable of living independently." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help you." "I didn't ask for help." "That's the problem," Diane said, and now the sweetness was gone from her voice, replaced by native frustration. "You never ask for help. You never admit when you can't handle things. You just keep hoarding more and more stuff until this house looks like an episode of that TV show." I felt my face flush hot. I am not a hoarder. Every item in this house has been carefully selected, cataloged, and maintained. My father was a collector. My husband was a restorer. This isn't hoarding, it's preservation of junk, Diane snapped. Betty, I've tried to be patient. I've tried to understand. But nobody needs 17 boxes of old coins. Nobody needs a closet full of broken watches. Nobody needs shelves of dusty teacups that never get used. It's junk, and it's taking over your life. It's not junk, I said quietly, dangerously. Those coins are from my father's years working in European embassies. Those watches were my husband's passion. He restored every single one. Those teacups were my mother's collection, each one from a different country she visited. They're not junk. They're my family's legacy. They're things, Marcus said, his voice tired. Just things, Mom. And they're not worth your safety. We went back and forth for another hour. They'd pull out one argument. I'd counter it. They'd try another angle. I'd shut it down. Finally, exhausted and hurting and frustrated, I told them to leave. Said I needed to rest. Promised we'd talk about it later when everyone was calmer. But we never got that conversation. Because 3 days later, while I was at a follow-up doctor's appointment for my ankle, Marcus and Diane used the spare key I'd given them for emergencies and moved half my belongings into a storage unit. When I came home, my living room looked like it had been ransacked. I called Marcus immediately. What did you do? We're helping you declutter, he said, calm as could be. Mom, we can't keep having the same argument. We took some of the excess stuff to storage. You won't even notice it's gone. You broke into my house. We didn't break in. We used our key, the key you gave us, for emergencies. This is an emergency. Your living situation is unsafe. We're trying to help you. That's when I realized they weren't going to stop. This wasn't a one-time intervention. This was the beginning of them systematically taking control of my life, one helpful decision at a time. So I did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer. Her name was Margaret Chen, and she was 68 years old with a reputation for defending elder rights. I explained the situation, my capable, independent living, my son's forced decluttering, my fear that they were trying to take control of my assets and my home. Do you have any cognitive impairments? Margaret asked. Any medical diagnosis that would suggest you need assistance? None. My doctor says I'm in excellent health for my age. Sharp as ever, his words. And the house, is it in your name alone? Yes. Paid off 30 years ago. No mortgage, no liens, nothing. It's completely mine. Then they have no legal right to remove your belongings or force you into assisted living. You're a competent adult. This is called elder financial abuse. And we can stop it immediately. Relief washed over me. Finally, someone who understood. Someone who saw this for what it was. Not concerned children helping a declining parent, but controlling adults trying to override an inconvenient mother's autonomy. However, Margaret continued, and I heard the hesitation in her voice. I need to warn you, fighting this will damage your relationship with your son. Possibly permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Marcus, the little boy who'd helped me plant tomatoes in the backyard. The teenager who'd brought me flowers when Robert was in the hospital. The young man who'd cried in my arms the day we buried his father. And then I thought about the man he'd become, the one who called my treasures junk, the one who broke into my house to help me, the one who couldn't see me as a person anymore, just a problem to be managed. Yes? I said. I'm prepared. Margaret drafted a cease and desist letter. It was delivered to Marcus and Diane 2 days later, informing them that any further entry into my property without explicit permission would be considered trespassing, and any removal of my belongings would be treated as theft. It also included a copy of my recent cognitive assessment from my doctor, proving my mental competency. Marcus called within an hour of receiving it. Mom, what the hell? You got a lawyer? You left me no choice. We're trying to help you, and you're threatening us with legal action? You're not helping me. You're controlling me. There's a difference. This is insane. You're choosing junk over your own son? I'm choosing my autonomy over your interference. Marcus, I love you, but I won't let you bulldoze my life because you've decided you know what's best for me." He hung up on me. Diane sent a text an hour later. "We're done trying to help an ungrateful woman who values garbage over family. Don't call us when you fall again and can't get up." I didn't respond. What was there to say? For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. I changed my locks. Margaret's advice. I installed a security system. I made sure every legal document was in order, every asset properly documented, every medical authorization pointing to Margaret as my healthcare proxy instead of Marcus. I prepared for battle, but the battle didn't come. Instead, something worse happened. I woke up one morning to find an ambulance in my driveway. Paramedics were knocking on my door, saying they'd received a call about an elderly woman who'd fallen and couldn't get up. I hadn't fallen. I was standing right there, perfectly fine, perfectly confused. "Who called you?" I asked. "Your son, ma'am. He said he's been trying to reach you for days and was worried." I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. Marcus had made a false emergency call, weaponizing the very system meant to protect people like me. The paramedics were apologetic but thorough. They had to check me over since the call had been made. During their assessment, Marcus and Diane arrived, faces painted with exaggerated concern. "Mom, thank God you're okay," Marcus said, trying to hug me. I stepped back. "There's nothing wrong with me." "Why did you call me?" "Because we've been worried sick. We haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. We thought something might have happened." "You haven't heard from me because you told me not to contact you." "That's not what I meant." "Mom, we're family. We should be able to check on you." One of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, looked between us. "Ma'am, are you certain you're all right? Is there anything you need?" "I'm fine," I said clearly. This was a false alarm. My son was mistaken. After they left, I turned to Marcus and Diane. "Don't ever do that again. You wasted emergency resources on a fake call. That's illegal." "We were concerned," Diane said, but there was something calculating in her eyes. "And honestly, Betty, this whole situation proves our point. You're isolated here. You won't let anyone help. What if something really did happen? Then I'd call 911 myself. Like a functioning adult." They left, but I knew it wasn't over. This was escalation, and I was right to be worried, because 2 days later, Marcus filed a petition for guardianship. The court papers arrived via process server. My son was officially seeking legal authority to make decisions about my health care, my finances, and my living situation. He claimed I was unable to care for myself, that I was living in unsafe conditions, that my hoarding disorder presented a danger to my well-being. Margaret was livid when I showed her the filing. "This is retaliatory and baseless. We'll fight it and win. But Betty, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. They're going to argue that your attachment to your possessions is pathological. They're going to paint you as a declining elderly woman who can't see reality. Are you prepared for that fight?" I thought about my collections, my father's coins from his diplomatic service, each one carefully preserved in archival cases with documentation of origin. My husband's restored pocket watches, 17 of them, each one a masterpiece of mechanical history. My mother's teacup collection, 43 pieces from 32 countries, each one representing a memory of her travels. These weren't junk. They were my family's story. "I'm prepared," I said. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I had to live under the shadow of this petition, knowing my son was actively trying to take away my rights. I threw myself into documentation. I photographed every collection, every piece. I organized my father's meticulous catalogs, showing the provenance and value of his coins. I found Robert's restoration journals, detailing every watch. I created a spreadsheet showing the estimated value of everything in my house, using online auction records and collector databases as references. When I was done, I sat back and looked at the total. Conservative estimate: $800,000. Likely actual value if properly appraised and sold through specialty auction houses: over $2 million. My junk was worth more than Marcus's house. I showed Margaret the documentation. She smiled. A sharp, satisfied smile. This is perfect. We'll get professional appraisals done before the hearing. I want to walk into that courtroom with documented proof that you're not a hoarder with worthless clutter. You're a collector with a valuable estate. But we never made it to that hearing. Because 1 week before the court date, while I was at my lawyer's office finalizing our strategy, Marcus and Diane made their move. They came to my house with a moving truck, using the medical petition as justification, even though it hadn't been approved yet. They convinced a locksmith I was being relocated for health reasons and needed emergency access. By the time I got home 3 hours later, my house was half empty, and there was a note on the kitchen counter. Mom, we've moved you to Meadowbrook Assisted Living in Beaverton. Your room is ready. We'll bring your essential items tomorrow. The rest is going to storage or being disposed of. We're doing this because we love you, even if you can't see it right now. Marcus. I stood in my ransacked home, looked at the empty shelves where my mother's teacups had been, saw the bare walls where Robert's restored clock had hung, noticed the missing boxes from the attic where my father's coin collection had lived for 50 years. And I didn't cry. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't even call Margaret, though I knew I should. Instead, I called my neighbor Carol, who'd been watching everything unfold with horrified sympathy. Carol, are your security cameras still recording? Always. You want the footage? Every second of it. Then I went to Meadowbrook Assisted Living, checked myself in, because what else could I do, and started planning. Not revenge, exactly. Just documentation. Evidence. The careful collection of facts that would show exactly who Marcus and Diane really were. I had no idea that 1 week later I'd get a phone call that would change everything. That a man named David Chen would dial my number with shaking hands and tell me that my family had just made the single biggest mistake of their lives. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I need to tell you about the garage sale. I learned about the garage sale from Carol, who sent me a text with a photo attached. It was Saturday morning, 3 days after I'd been installed in my Meadowbrook suite. A sterile room with beige walls and furniture that looked like it came from a hospital catalog. The photo showed my front yard, my beautiful Victorian home with its wraparound porch and original stained glass windows. But that's not what made my blood run cold. It was the tables, folding tables covered in bright plastic cloths, stretched across the lawn like a discount store explosion. And on those tables, spread out for strangers to paw through, was my entire life. Carol's text read, I'm so sorry. They started setting up at 6 a.m. Want me to go over and document everything? I called her immediately. Yes. Photograph every single item, every table, every sign, every person who buys something. Can you do that without them noticing? My bedroom window has a direct view. I'll use my telephoto lens. Thank you. And Carol? Record video too if you can. I want to see how they're describing things to buyers. For the next 4 hours, I sat in my beige room at Meadowbrook, watching my phone as photo after photo came through. Each one was a knife to the heart. My mother's teacup collection, spread across a table with a sign, Vintage China, $2 each, or $20 for all. 43 pieces of carefully curated history, each one representing a country my mother had visited, a memory she'd treasured, $20 for all of them. My father's coin collection, decades of careful acquisition, each coin in its archival holder with documentation, dumped into a large plastic bin with a handwritten sign, foreign coins $5 per handful. Robert's pocket watches, the ones he'd spent years restoring, each one a mechanical marvel, old watches, $10 each. Most don't work. Because Marcus and Diane never wound them. Never understood that mechanical watches need to be maintained, need to be cared for. They just saw broken things that didn't tick. But the worst photo came at 10:30 a.m. It showed Diane standing beside a wooden crate that I recognized immediately. It was my father's most prized possession, a collection of items he'd gathered during his years in the diplomatic service. Swiss military memorabilia, Victorian-era jewelry from his posting in London, pre-war currency from Berlin, hand-painted porcelain from his time in Beijing. She'd written on the crate in permanent marker, "Random old stuff, box $50. Don't ask me what it is, I don't know." That box contained items worth more than both their cars combined, and she was selling it for $50 without even looking inside. I called Margaret. She answered on the first ring. "They're having a garage sale," I said, my voice shaking not with sadness but with rage. "They're selling my collections, my father's coins, Robert's watches, everything. Do you have documentation of ownership?" "Of course I do. Everything is photographed, cataloged, insured." "Are they selling items worth more than I laughed, a bitter sound. "Margaret, they're selling items worth more than $50,000. Individually. They just don't know it." There was a pause. Then, "Betty, this changes everything. This isn't just forced relocation anymore. This is liquidation of assets without permission. This is theft, potentially grand theft depending on the total value. What do I do?" "Document everything. Get photos, get witness statements from your neighbor. If possible, find out who's buying the items. We may need to contact them. And Betty, let them finish the sale. Let them sell everything. Because the more they steal, the stronger our case becomes." It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I followed Margaret's advice. I sat in that beige room and watched my life be sold off, piece by piece. Carol sent me a running total. By noon, Marcus had posted on the Meadowbrook family board, triumphant. Successfully cleaned out Mom's hoarding situation. Made $347. Donating it to the assisted living facility in her name. Donating my stolen property's sales proceeds in my name. The audacity was breathtaking. Carol's final message came at 2 p.m. "They're packing up. Almost everything sold. Betty, I'm so sorry. There was one man, though, older Asian gentleman, who bought that wooden crate. He seemed very interested in it, kept examining the items carefully, took lots of photos, gave Marcus his business card. Want me to see if I can read it?" "Yes." 5 minutes later. David Chen, estate appraisals and antique authentication. Betty, I think he knew what he was buying. My heart started racing. An estate appraiser had bought my father's collection. Someone who would actually understand what those items were worth. Someone who would recognize the difference between garage sale junk and legitimate antiques. Did he pay the fine? Yes. Watched him count it out. Marcus looked so pleased with himself. I sat there for a long moment, letting it all sink in. Then I started making a list. Every item I could remember that had been sold. Every collection that had been dismantled. I estimated values, conservative values based on online auction records and collector forums. When I was done, the total made me dizzy. $2.3 million. That's what they'd sold for 300, give or take a few $100,000 depending on condition and authentication. My junk was worth more than Marcus would earn in his entire lifetime. I sent the estimate to Margaret with a note. "Here's what they stole." Her response was immediate. "File a police report Monday morning. I'll draft the civil suit. And Betty, we're going to destroy them." Sunday passed in a strange calm. Marcus sent me a text. "Stopped by Meadowbrook to drop off some of your clothes. You were at activities, so we left them at the desk. Hope you're settling in. The house is so much better now. You'll see when you visit. We're turning your old room into Diane's yoga studio." My old room, the master bedroom, where Robert and I had slept for 40 years, where we'd comforted each other through losses and celebrated our joys, where I'd held my husband's hand as he took his last breath. Diane's yoga studio. I didn't respond. Let them think I was complying. Let them think they'd won. Monday morning, I was at the police station when it opened. The officer who took my report was young, maybe 30, and I could see skepticism in his eyes when I started explaining. Elderly woman claiming her family stole millions in antiques. Sure, lady, but then I showed him the documentation, the photographs, the catalog entries. the insurance appraisals from 5 years ago, when I'd last updated my policy, the security camera footage Carol had given me, showing Marcus and Diane loading my belongings into a truck without my knowledge or permission. The skepticism faded. He called his supervisor. They called a detective. By noon, I'd given a formal statement and they'd opened an investigation for grand theft and elder abuse. Mrs. Patterson, the detective said, a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes. I have to tell you, cases like this rarely result in criminal charges. Family dynamics, gray areas about permission, proving intent, it's complicated, but the civil case, that you'll win, and it will be devastating for them. I don't want to devastate them, I said, and meant it. I want them to understand, to see what they've done, to realize that they weren't helping me, they were robbing me. Then prepare for that understanding to cost them everything they have. Because based on these values, you'll well win your rights to sue for the full amount plus emotional damages, and that will bankrupt them. I thought about Emma, Marcus and Diane's daughter. 7 years old, smart and funny, the one bright spot in their entitled lives. Did I want to destroy her family? Make her parents financially ruined? Turn her childhood into a battlefield? But then I thought about how they'd treated me. Not just the theft, but the dismissal. The way they'd called my treasures junk. The way they'd forced me into assisted living against my will. The way they'd tried to take guardianship. To strip me of my autonomy. To reduce me to a problem that needed to be managed. File everything, I said. That afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. Mrs. Patterson? This is David Chen from Chen Estate Appraisals. I purchased a wooden crate at your family's garage sale on Saturday. Ma'am, I need to speak with you urgently about its contents. My heart hammered. Mr. Chen, I'm aware of what was in that crate. That was my father's diplomatic collection. Then you know that it's worth a substantial amount? Yes. That my family had no right to sell it? Also, yes. Mr. Chen, I'm working with lawyers and police. That sale was unauthorized. Everything sold was stolen from me. There was a long pause. Mrs. Patterson, I'm very sorry to hear that, and I want you to know I suspected something was wrong when I saw those items being sold for 50 yuans. Nobody who understood what they had would price it that way. That's why I documented everything before I even left your driveway. Documented how? Photographs, video, detailed notes about condition. I also recorded the entire transaction, including your son telling me, and I quote, "It's just old junk from my hoarder mother. Take it off our hands." Miss Patterson, I have a master's degree in art history and 30 years of experience in estate appraisals. I specialize in Victorian-era collectibles and diplomatic memorabilia. And what I found in that crate is significant. How significant? I've done preliminary authentication on 3 pieces so far. The Victorian brooch alone, the one with the sapphire stones and the royal maker's mark. That's worth approximately $340,000. The Swiss military pocket watch is another $180,000. The Ming Dynasty vase. Miss Patterson, if it's authentic, and my initial assessment suggests it is, that single piece is worth over. I sat down hard on my beige institutional bed. What's the total? I've only examined about 20% of the items so far, but my conservative estimate for everything in that crate? $1.8 to $2.3 million. Mrs. Patterson, your family didn't sell you junk for $50. They sold you a museum-quality collection for the price of a pizza. And that's when I started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind that comes when reality becomes so absurd that tears won't cut it. My son, who'd called me a hoarder. My daughter-in-law, who'd called my possessions trash. They'd stolen and sold $2.3 million for $37, then posted triumphantly about donating the proceeds to charity. Mr. Chen, I said when I could speak again, I need you to do me a favor. Anything. Don't tell them. Not yet. Let me set up the legal framework first. Let me get everything documented, filed, prepared. And then, when the time is right, I want you to send them a formal appraisal. I want them to see, in writing, exactly what they've done. Mrs. Patterson, I should tell you, I'm legally required to attempt to return stolen property to its rightful owner. And that's you. I bought these items in good faith, but they weren't the sellers to sell. I understand, and we'll work that out through my lawyer. But Mr. Chen, the crate isn't the only thing they sold. There were pocket watches worth $15,000 each, going for $10, teacups worth $8,000, selling for $2, coins worth $50,000 dumped in a bin for $5 per handful. I need you to help me find those items, track down the buyers, document everything that was sold. Can you do that? Consider it done, Mrs. Patterson. If I may say so, your family are idiots. Yes, I agreed, but they're about to be educated idiots. We spoke for another hour. David explained how he'd photograph and authenticate everything from the crate. He'd reach out to other buyers from the garage sale. Carol had helped him get names and contact information from the people she'd photographed. He'd prepare a comprehensive appraisal that would hold up in court. This is going to take some time, he warned. Proper authentication, especially for the diplomatic pieces and the Asian antiquities, requires specialists. I'll need to consult with colleagues, possibly send items to museums for verification. We're talking weeks, maybe months. I have time, I said. I'm not going anywhere. After we hung up, I sat in my beige room and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not sadness, but purpose. Clarity. The absolute certainty that I was right and they were wrong, and soon everyone would know it. I called Margaret and told her everything. She laughed. Actually laughed. Betty, this is the most beautiful case I've seen in 20 years. They tried to take guardianship claiming you couldn't manage your affairs. Meanwhile, they're the ones who committed grand theft and didn't even realize it because they were too arrogant to get professional appraisals. What happens now? Now we wait for David's authentication to be complete. We let the police investigation proceed. We let Marcus and Diane enjoy their cleaned-out house and their sense of accomplishment. And then, when every piece of documentation is perfect and irrefutable, we drop the hammer so hard they'll never recover. Margaret, I don't want to destroy them. I want them to understand. Betty, sometimes the only way people understand is through consequences. Real, devastating consequences. And trust me, when this is done, they'll understand exactly what they've done. They'll understand the value of what they dismissed as junk. They'll understand the cruelty of forcing you out of your home. They'll understand that you weren't a hoarder or a burden or a problem to be solved. You were a competent adult with valuable assets who they stole from. She was right. Understanding was going to cost them everything. But I wasn't ready for how it would feel when that understanding finally came. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of living in my beige room at Meadowbrook, attending mandatory activities like chair yoga and paint by numbers, pretending to be a compliant resident while behind the scenes, my lawyer built a case that would shake my family to their foundations. Marcus and Diane visited twice. Both times they brought Emma, using her as a shield against any real conversation. Look, Emma, Grandma has a new room, Diane would say brightly, gesturing at the institutional furniture and generic landscape paintings, like she was showing off a luxury apartment. Emma would hug me, and I'd hold her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, trying not to let my granddaughter see how much I missed my real home. Grandma, when can I visit your house again? Emma asked during the second visit. I miss the attic. My attic, where I'd let her play dress-up with my mother's old clothes, where we doored through my father's coin collection together, and I told her stories about each country, each embassy, each adventure, where she'd been learning about history and geography and the value of preservation. The house is different now, sweetie, Marcus said quickly, before I could answer. We've remodeled, made it better. I liked it how it was, Emma said quietly. So did I, baby. So did I. After they left, I'd return to my room and check my email. David sent updates every few days, progress reports that read like archaeological discoveries. Auntentated the military pocket watch. Swiss Guard, circa 1908. Conservative auction estimate, 100 Ming vase sent to Dr. Lisa Wong at the Asian Art Museum for verification. She's 85% certain it's authentic Shawande period. If confirmed, $600,000. Located the woman who bought the teacup collection for 20 alais. She's a collector herself and to return them upon proof of ownership. Betty, these aren't just any teacups. 3 of them are Meissen porcelain from the 1890s. The set is worth approximately one. Each email was validation. Proof that I hadn't been crazy or sentimental or a hoarder. Proof that my father's collections were exactly what I'd always known them to be. Valuable, significant, worth preserving. The police investigation moved forward in parallel. Detective Morrison became a regular contact, calling every week with updates. "We've interviewed your son," she said during one call. "He maintains that he had your verbal permission to clean out the house." "That's a lie." "I know. We have your neighbor's security footage showing them moving items while you were at the lawyer's office. We have the locksmith's statement that they told him you'd already been relocated. We have text messages where they discussed getting rid of Mom's junk before you'd even agreed to leave. Betty, we have enough for criminal charges if you want to press them." "Not yet," I said. "Not until the civil case is ready. I want everything to happen at once. I want them to understand the full scope of what they've done." By week 8, David had authenticated $1.9 million worth of items. He was still working on some pieces, consulting with specialists at Christie's and Sotheby's, sending photographs to museum curators, building bulletproof provenance documentation for each piece. The Victorian brooch alone required 3 separate expert opinions, he explained during one of our phone calls. "But Betty, the consensus is unanimous. This is an authentic piece from the royal jeweler Gerard, likely commissioned for a minor member of the British aristocracy, and the sapphires are natural, not heat-treated. The gold is 22 carat. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. At auction, this single piece could fetch $400,000, possibly more if the right buyer is in the room." "My father bought that in London in 1952, I said softly. "He paid £200 for it. The jeweler told him it was a good investment. I don't think even he knew how good. Your father had an excellent eye. Everything in this collection shows careful curation. These weren't impulse purchases. They were strategic acquisitions by someone who understood value and history. He worked in diplomatic services for 40 years. He always said that beautiful things transcended politics, that art and craftsmanship were humanity's common language. He was right. And Betty, his collection deserves to be in a museum, or at the very least cataloged and preserved properly. What your family did selling these pieces at a garage sale, it's not just theft from you, it's theft from history." That perspective shifted something in me. This wasn't just about my loss anymore. It was about preserving my father's legacy, honoring his work, protecting the stories these objects carry. "David, when this is all over, when we've recovered what we can, I want to donate some pieces, create a collection in my father's name. Would you help me with that? It would be an honor." By week 10, Margaret called with news. "The civil suit is ready to file. Police have completed their investigation and are recommending charges. David has finished authentication on everything he's been able to locate. Betty, it's time. Are you ready?" Was I ready? Ready to watch my son's face when he learned the truth. Ready to see his world collapse. Ready to force him to understand that I wasn't a problem to be managed, but a person who deserved respect. I'm ready. I'm filing tomorrow morning. The lawsuit, the police report, everything hits at once. And Betty, I'm also filing an emergency motion to remove you from Meadowbrook. You were placed there under duress, without proper legal procedure. Judge Anderson has already reviewed my brief and indicated she'll likely grant it. You could be home within 48 hours. Home. My Victorian house with its stained glass windows and wraparound porch. Even if it had been ransacked, even if half my belongings were gone, it was still home. What about Marcus and Diane? What happens to them? They'll be served with the lawsuit. Criminal charges are a separate process. That's up to the prosecutor based on the police recommendation. But civilly, Betty, we're suing for $2.3 million in stolen property, plus emotional damages, plus the cost of professional appraisals, legal fees, and your forced relocation. Even if we settle for less, this will bankrupt them. And Emma? Margaret was quiet for a moment. Emma will be fine. She has two parents who will hopefully learn from this catastrophic mistake. But Betty, you can't protect them from consequences. Not anymore. What they did was criminal. You have to let them face that. I thought about my granddaughter, 7 years old, smart and curious, the one person in that family who'd never treated me like a burden. Would she understand why Grandma had destroyed her parents? Would she hate me? File everything, I said, my voice steady. Emma's young. She'll recover. But if I let Marcus and Diane get away with this, they'll never change. And I won't be anyone's victim. The next morning, Marcus received his documents. The lawsuit, all 47 pages of it, detailing every item sold, every dollar value, every instance of theft and elder abuse. The police report recommending criminal charges, and a letter from David Chen, marked urgent legal notice, containing preliminary appraisals of the items from the wooden crate. He called me at 9:47 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:53. Again at 10:15. Diane called. I ignored that too. Finally, at 10:34, I answered. Mom, his voice was shaking. Mom, what is this? What did you do? I documented theft. I protected my assets. I exercised my legal rights. This says we stole $2.3 million from you. That's insane. We got rid of junk. Read the appraisals, Marcus, from actual professionals, from museums, from auction houses. That wasn't junk. It was never junk. It was my inheritance, my family's legacy, and you stole it because you were too arrogant to believe I knew what I had. This has to be a mistake. Those values are inflated. Nobody would pay. Christie's has already expressed interest in auctioning several pieces. The Asian Art Museum wants the Ming vase for their permanent collection. The Smithsonian is interested in the diplomatic memorabilia. Marcus, these aren't inflated values. If anything, they're conservative. You sold a museum-quality collection for $37 and bragged about donating the money in my name. I heard Diane in the background, her voice high and panicked. Let me talk to her. Give me the phone. Betty, Diane's voice came through, sharp with desperation. You can't do this. We have a daughter. We have a mortgage. This lawsuit will destroy us. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. We didn't steal. We were helping you. You were living in unsafe conditions, surrounded by clutter. Stop calling it clutter. My voice cracked, years of dismissed expertise and belittled knowledge finally erupting. My father spent 40 years curating that collection. My husband spent decades restoring those watches. I spent my entire life preserving our family's history. And you looked at it for 5 minutes, decided it was worthless, and sold it without even asking an expert. You didn't help me. You robbed me. And now you're going to face the consequences. We'll fight this, Diane said, but her voice was trembling. We'll get lawyers. We'll prove that you gave us permission. With what evidence? The security footage showing you breaking in while I was at my attorney's office. The take messages where you discussed selling my things before I even agreed to leave. The locksmith's statement that you lied about my relocation. Diane, I have documentation. You have excuses. Fight me if you want. You'll lose everything. Marcus took the phone back. Mom, please, we made a mistake. We didn't know. If we'd known those things were valuable, then you would have stolen them more carefully. That's not the defense you think it is. No, I mean, we wouldn't have sold them. We would have helped you properly inventory them, get them appraised. Why didn't you do that in the first place? I asked quietly. Why didn't you ask me about my collections? Why didn't you trust that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I had? Marcus, I told you those items were valuable. I told you they were family heirlooms. I told you not to touch them, and you ignored me because you'd already decided I was a delusional old woman whose opinions didn't matter. Silence. That's what this is really about, isn't it? I continued. Not the money, not the collections, but the fact that you stopped seeing me as a competent adult. You saw a problem, a burden, someone whose life you could reorganize because yours was more important. You dismissed everything I said, everything I valued, everything I'd spent my life building. And now you're shocked that I'm defending myself. I didn't mean. His voice broke. Mom, I love you. We were trying to help. Then you should have asked what kind of help I needed. You should have listened when I said I was fine. You should have respected my autonomy instead of overriding it. Marcus, you didn't help me. You betrayed me, and I can't pretend that didn't happen just because you're sorry now that you got caught. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not with fear, with the overwhelming relief of finally saying the truth out loud, of refusing to minimize, refuse to excuse, refusing to make their feelings more important than my reality. My phone buzzed with texts immediately. Marcus. Mom, please, we can fix this. Diane. You're destroying your own family over things. Marcus, think about Emma. What will we tell her? That last one made me pause. What would they tell Emma? Would they paint me as the villain? The vindictive grandmother who sued them over a misunderstanding? Would I lose my granddaughter because I'd refused to be a doormat? I called Margaret. They're panicking. Good, let them panic. Betty, we have court tomorrow morning for your emergency release from Meadowbrook. After that, we'll address their inevitable attempts to negotiate. But right now, stay strong. You did nothing wrong. Emma has two parents who need to explain why they stole from her grandmother. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself. Court the next day was surreal. Judge Anderson was a woman in her 60s who read through Margaret's brief with sharp, intelligent eyes. Marcus and Diane weren't even there. They hadn't been notified of this specific hearing, only of the lawsuit. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said, looking at me over her reading glasses. You were placed in Meadowbrook assisted living against your will? Yes, Your Honor. And your son claimed medical necessity as justification? Yes, though I've provided documentation showing I have no cognitive impairment or physical disability that would require assisted living. I see that. I also see that he filed for guardianship, which hasn't been heard yet and may now be moot given these theft charges. She flipped through more pages. Mrs. Patterson, based on this evidence, I'm granting your emergency release. You're free to return to your home immediately. I'm also issuing a restraining order, preventing your son and daughter-in-law from entering your property or contacting you except through attorneys until this matter is resolved. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, thank you. And Mrs. Patterson? I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases. Usually they're about money. Sometimes they're about control. But this case is about something deeper. It's about respect, or the lack thereof. I hope your family learned something from these consequences. Margaret drove me home. My house looked different, emptier, ransacked, violated. But it was mine. My front door, my stained glass windows, my wraparound porch. Carol came running over before I'd even made it inside. Betty! Oh my God, you're home! I've been keeping an eye on the place. Change the locks like your lawyer asked. Here's your new keys. Thank you, Carol, for everything. The footage, the photographs, the testimony. Are you kidding? That's what neighbors do. Besides, watching Marcus's face when the police showed up to interview him about grand theft charges. Best entertainment I've had in years. I walked through my house slowly, taking inventory of what remained. They'd taken about 60% of my belongings. The living room was nearly empty. The attic was stripped bare. But my bedroom, they'd left that mostly intact. In the basement workshop, Robert's sanctuary, they'd apparently never even entered. I sat on my bed in my room in my house and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The violation, the anger, the grief for what had been lost, but also, surprisingly, hope. Because I was home. I was free. And I was fighting back. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered cautiously. Mrs. Patterson? This is Janet Rodriguez from Channel 8 News. I received a tip about your case. Elder abuse, grand theft, valuable antiques sold at a garage sale. Would you be willing to go on record? I thought about it. Public exposure would humiliate Marcus and Diane even further. It would make Emma's life harder at school. It would turn our family drama into entertainment, but it would also warn other families, other elderly people who were being dismissed, controlled, robbed by children who thought they knew better. Yes, I said. I'll go on record. The interview aired 3 days later. Channel 8 did a full segment. Local woman sues family after they sold $2.3 million collection for $347 at garage sale. They showed David Chen's appraisals. They interviewed Detective Morrison about the criminal investigation. They filmed my ransacked house and my attic's empty shelves. And they interviewed me. Mrs. Patterson, your son claims he was trying to help you. What do you say to that? I say that help requires consent. He never asked what I needed. He decided what was best for me and forced it on me. That's not help. That's control. The items he sold, he claims he didn't know their value. He didn't know because he didn't ask. He assumed that because I was elderly, my judgment was suspect. He dismissed decades of my expertise, my careful curation, my explicit statements about value. And now he wants sympathy because his arrogance cost him millions. The segment went viral. Local news picked it up, then regional, then national. Within 48 hours, I was getting interview requests from major networks. My story became a cautionary tale about elder abuse, about the importance of respecting aging parents, about what happens when children decide they know better than their competent, capable parents. And Marcus and Diane became national symbols of entitled, disrespectful children who got what they deserved. I felt no satisfaction in their humiliation, just a grim acknowledgement that sometimes people only learn through public shame. But this was just the beginning. The real reckoning was still to come. The confrontation came on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the news segment aired. Margaret had scheduled a mandatory mediation, standard procedure in civil cases before trial. Marcus, Diane, their lawyer, Margaret, a mediator, and me, all crammed into a sterile conference room at the county courthouse. I hadn't seen them since before the lawsuit, since before they knew, since before their world collapsed. Marcus looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and his suit, usually pristine, was wrinkled. Diane looked worse. Her carefully maintained appearance had cracked. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes red from crying. Their lawyer was a young man, probably fresh out of law school, who looked deeply uncomfortable with his clients and their indefensible position. Let's begin, the mediator said, a woman in her 50s with a brisk, no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Reynolds, would you like to make an opening statement? Marcus's lawyer cleared his throat. Yes, we're here today because of what we believe was a tragic misunderstanding. My clients acknowledged that they removed Mrs. Patterson's belongings from her home and sold them at a garage sale. However, they maintained that they did so with her implicit permission, in what they believed was her best interest, and without knowledge of the item's actual value. Implicit permission, Margaret interrupted. She had hired an attorney and sent them a cease and desist letter explicitly forbidding them from removing anything else from her home. What part of that is implicit permission? The cease and desist was before she was relocated to assisted living. She was relocated against her will after they broke into her home while she was at my office. The mediator held up a hand. Let's hear from Mrs. Patterson. Betty, can you explain, in your own words, what happened? I looked at Marcus as I spoke, made him hold my gaze. My son decided I was too old to live independently. He decided my collections were junk. He decided I needed to be in assisted living. I disagreed with all of those decisions. I told him no, repeatedly. He ignored me. He filed for guardianship, which was denied, so he took matters into his own hands, broke into my house, moved me to Meadowbrook without my consent, and sold my belongings without my knowledge or permission. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft. Mom, Marcus said, his voice breaking. I thought I was saving your life. I thought you were going to hurt yourself in that house. I thought the clutter was dangerous. Did you ask an occupational therapist to assess my home? Did you consult with my doctor about my capability to live independently? Did you hire a professional appraiser to evaluate my collections? Did you do anything besides make assumptions based on your opinion that I was too old to know what I was doing? Silence. That's what I thought, I continued. Marcus, you could have helped me. You could have offered to help me organize, to catalog, to get professional appraisals. You could have respected my expertise about my own possessions. Instead, you decided you knew better. You decided I was incompetent, and you acted on that decision without my consent. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't trust me. You didn't respect me. And now you want me to forgive you because you feel bad? I shook my head. I might have forgiven a mistake. I can't forgive contempt. Diane spoke up, her voice sharp despite the tears. What do you want from us, Betty? Blood? We've already lost everything. Our savings are gone. We've had to hire lawyers. Our reputation is destroyed. Your news interview made us national villains. Marcus got put on leave from work because his company doesn't want the publicity. Our friends won't talk to us. Emma's getting bullied at school because her classmates saw us on TV. You've destroyed our lives. Isn't that enough? I haven't destroyed anything, I said calmly. You did. I'm just holding you accountable. For what? For caring about you. For stealing from me. For forcing me into a facility against my will. For dismissing my judgment, my aperçus, my explicitly stated wishes. For treating me like I was incompetent simply because I was old. I leaned forward. Diane, you called me a hoarder. You told people I had a mental disorder. You sold my family's legacy for pizza money, and then bragged about donating the proceeds. You didn't care about me. You wanted me gone so you could take my house. Her face flushed red. That's not true, isn't it? Carol showed me the texts. The ones where you and Marcus discussed turning my house into rental income. The ones where you planned to use guardianship to force me into the cheapest facility you could find. The ones where you talked about finally getting your inheritance. You thought I was going to die soon and you wanted to position yourself to benefit. Mrs. Patterson, the mediator, interrupted gently. I understand your anger, but we're here to discuss resolution. What would a settlement look like for you? I looked at Margaret. We discussed this. Prepared for this moment. Full restitution, Margaret said crisply. Return of all items still in their possession. Payment for items sold that cannot be recovered, based on professional appraisals, not garage sale prices. That's $2.3 million, plus emotional damages of $500,000 for forced relocation and elder abuse, plus all legal fees, appraisal costs, and investigation expenses. Total approximately $3 million. Marcus's lawyer actually laughed. My clients don't have $3 million. They don't have $300,000. They have a mortgaged house, 2 car loans, and $40,000 in credit card debt. You're asking for blood from a stone. Then they'll need to get creative, Margaret replied. Sell the house, liquidate retirement accounts, declare bankruptcy if necessary, but they will pay restitution for what they stole. Mom, please. Marcus was crying now, actually crying. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I can't pay you millions of dollars. It's impossible. You'll destroy us completely. You destroyed yourself, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. What about Emma? Diane demanded. She's 7 years old. If we lose our house, if we go bankrupt, she loses everything too. Her school, her friends, her stability. Are you really going to do that to your own granddaughter? And there it was, the guilt card, the one weapon they had left. Emma is not responsible for your choices, I said firmly. And I won't be manipulated by concern for her well-being when you clearly weren't concerned about mine. You forced me out of my home. You stole my belongings. You tried to strip me of my legal right, and now you want me to absorb the financial and emotional cost of your crimes, because otherwise your daughter might have to change schools. She's your granddaughter. And you're my son. My voice cracked, years of hurt finally breaking through. You're supposed to protect me, Marcus. You're supposed to respect me. You're supposed to believe me when I tell you something is valuable, something matters, something is mine. Instead, you treated me like a problem, like an inconvenient old woman whose wishes didn't matter because you'd decided what was best. Do you have any idea how that felt? Watching you sell my life for pocket change, watching you dismiss 40 years of careful curation as junk. He was sobbing now, his face in his hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing to say. The time for apologies was before you committed grand theft. Now we're past words. Now there are consequences. The mediation went nowhere. They couldn't pay. We wouldn't reduce the demand. The mediator tried various compromises, payment plans, partial restitution, public apologies, but Margaret shut them all down. My client is 72 years old, Margaret said. She doesn't have time for a 20-year payment plan. She wants her property back, or compensated for what was stolen. That's not negotiable. We left after 3 hours of circular arguments. As we walked to the car, Marcus caught up with me. Mom, wait, please, just talk to me. Not as a plaintiff and defendant. As your son. I stopped, turned to face him. Saw the man he'd become. Broken, desperate, finally understanding what he'd done. Too late, but understanding nonetheless. What do you want me to say, Marcus? That you forgive me, that we can fix this, that you don't hate me. I thought about it, about the little boy who'd held my hand, about the young man who'd cried at his father's funeral, about all the versions of him I'd loved before he became this person who could steal from his own mother. I don't hate you, I said slowly, but I don't forgive you either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You didn't just steal things, Marcus. You stole my dignity, my autonomy, my right to be believed. And then you sold it all for $37 and felt good about yourself. I can't forgive that. What do I have to do? How do I fix this? You start by accepting that some things can't be fixed. You destroyed trust that took 72 years to build. You made me afraid in my own home. You made me fight for my basic rights. You humiliated me, dismissed me, and stole from me. Those aren't things you fix, Marcus. Those are things you live with. And if you're lucky, maybe someday, years from now, I'll be able to look at you without remembering how it felt to be treated like garbage by my own son. I got in Margaret's car and didn't look back. 3 months later, we went to trial. Marcus and Diane's lawyer had tried everything to avoid it. Motions to dismiss, requests for delays, offers of partial settlement, but Margaret had been immovable. We were going to court, and we were going to win. The courtroom was surprisingly full. The case had become something of a local celebrity trial, news crews outside, spectators filling the gallery, even a sketch artist for one of the national papers. Judge Anderson presided, the same judge who'd granted my emergency release from Meadowbrook. She'd followed the case and made no secret of her opinions during preliminary hearings. This is a straightforward theft case complicated by family dynamics, she'd said during one hearing. But family doesn't excuse criminal behavior. If anything, it makes it worse. The prosecution, this had become a criminal trial, after the prosecutor reviewed Detective Morrison's investigation, laid out their case methodically. They showed the security footage of Marcus and Diane loading my belongings into a truck while I was at Margaret's office. They played the recording of Marcus telling the locksmith I'd already been relocated for health reasons, a lie. They presented the cease and desist letter I'd sent, explicitly forbidding further removal of my property. They brought in the buyers from the garage sale, people who testified about how Marcus and Diane had described the items as worthless junk from a hoarder mother. They showed David Chen's appraisals, each one more damning than the last. $340,000 brooch sold for $5. $180,000 pocket watch sold for $10. $600,000 Ming vase sold as part of a $50 box lot. And they brought me to the stand. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Elena Rodriguez, walked me through the entire story. My father's collections, Robert's restorations, my years of careful preservation, Marcus's escalating control, the forced relocation, the unauthorized garage sale. Mrs. Patterson, Elena asked, when you saw your belongings being sold, what did you feel? Violated, I said quietly, like I'd been robbed, which I had been. Did you give permission for this sale? Absolutely not. I'd explicitly forbidden it in writing. And when you learned the value of what had been sold, vindicated. For years, my son had called my collections junk, had treated me like a delusional old woman who didn't understand value. The appraisals proved I'd been right all along, that I'd been protecting something significant, that my judgment was sound. Marcus's lawyer cross-examined me. He was better than I'd expected, sharper than during mediation. Mrs. Patterson, your son claims he was worried about your safety, that your home was cluttered and difficult to navigate. Was that true? My home was full. It wasn't cluttered. Is there a difference? Yes. Clutter is disorganized chaos. My collections were carefully organized, cataloged, and stored. Every item had a place and a purpose. But to someone unfamiliar with your systems, might it have appeared cluttered? To someone who didn't bother to ask about my systems, perhaps. Mrs. Patterson, do you acknowledge that your son loves you and believed he was acting in your best interest? I paused, considered the question carefully. I believe my son convinced himself he loved me while treating me with contempt. Love requires respect. It requires listening. It requires trusting the other person's judgment. Marcus did none of those things. He decided what was best for me without consulting me, and he called it love. That's not love. That's control. The lawyer tried a few more angles, but I'd been preparing for this moment for months. Margaret had coached me. I knew my facts, knew my rights, knew my worth. When David Chen took the stand, the courtroom went silent. He was an impressive witness, credentialed, articulate, impossible to dismiss. Mr. Chen, Elena asked, in your professional opinion, what was the actual value of the items sold at this garage sale? Based on my authentication and appraisals, approximately $2.3 million. Conservative estimate. At auction with the right buyers, possibly higher. And what was paid for these items? To Ryu 7. A murmur went through the courtroom. Even though everyone knew the numbers by now, hearing them stated so baldly in court made the theft undeniable. Mr. Chen, is it possible that a reasonable person might not recognize the value of these items? A reasonable person? No. But a prudent person would seek expert opinion before selling items that appeared antique or unusual. Mr. Patterson and his wife did not. They assumed, without expertise, that these items were worthless. That assumption cost them millions. Marcus took the stand in his own defense. His lawyer had clearly coached him. He was contrite, emotional, repeatedly emphasizing his love for me and his fear for my safety. I thought I was saving my mother's life, he said, tears streaming down his face. I thought she was going to fall again, hurt herself, maybe die alone in that house surrounded by all those things. I was scared. And yes, I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I acted out of love. Elena's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Patterson, you say you acted out of love. Did you love your mother when you called her a hoarder to the garage sale customers? I was frustrated. I didn't mean. Did you love her when you texted your wife saying, finally getting the old hag out of my inheritance? Marcus went pale. That text was taken out of context. The context was you discussing selling your mother's house after forcing her into assisted living. What context makes that attachable? I was angry. She'd gotten a lawyer, threatened us. She got a lawyer because you'd broken into her home and stolen her belongings. Mr. Patterson, you say you acted out of love. But your actions, forcing relocation, stealing property, lying to authorities, selling family heirlooms without permission, those aren't loving actions. Those are the actions of someone who viewed his mother as an obstacle to be removed. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Grand theft, elder abuse, fraud. Diane was convicted as an accomplice on all but the fraud charge. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Anderson looked at Marcus and Diane with open disgust. "I've been on the bench for 25 years, she said. I've seen children steal from parents for drug money, for gambling debts, for desperate situations. But this case is different. You two weren't desperate. You were entitled. You believed you had the right to override your mother's wishes because you decided she was too old to know what was good for her. That arrogance led you to commit crimes that, in purely financial terms, rank among the largest thefts I've seen in this courtroom." She sentenced Marcus to 18 months in prison, Diane to 12. Both were ordered to pay full restitution, $2.3 million plus emotional damages, legal fees, and court costs. Total 3. "I know you can't pay this," Judge Anderson said. "You'll likely declare bankruptcy. You'll lose your home. Your credit will be destroyed. But Mrs. Patterson deserves compensation. And if you spend the rest of your lives making payments, so be it. You stole from her. You'll spend your lives repaying that debt." I watched Marcus break down completely, watched Diane shake with sobs, watched the bailiffs lead them away to begin their sentences, and I felt empty, not victorious, not satisfied, just exhausted. Margaret put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." "Then why doesn't it feel right?" "Because they're still your family, and watching family face consequences, even deserved consequences, hurts. But Betty, you had to do this. For yourself. For every other elderly person being dismissed and controlled by children who think they know better. You drew a line and held it. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I made one statement, brief and firm. I didn't want to destroy my family. I wanted them to respect me. They chose theft over respect. These consequences are the result of their choices, not mine. And I hope other families learn from this. Your parents deserve dignity, trust, and autonomy regardless of their age. Love without respect isn't love. It's control, and control has consequences. That night, I sat in my partially restored house and thought about Emma. 7 years old, both parents in prison, her life turned upside down. She was staying with Diane's sister, who'd sent me one bitter text. "I hope you're satisfied. You destroyed her whole life." Was I satisfied? No. Did I regret my actions? Also no. Sometimes the right thing and the easy thing are different. I'd chosen right over easy. Emma would survive. Children are resilient. But if I'd rolled over, if I'd let Marcus and Diane get away with theft because family, what would I have taught Emma? That it's okay to steal if you claim to love the victim? That elderly people don't deserve respect? That consequences don't apply if you apologize sweetly enough? No. Emma would learn a harder but more valuable lesson. Actions have consequences, even for family. Especially for family. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Ellen Bradford from the Smithsonian. We received your father's diplomatic collection from Mr. Chen. I've been through every piece. This is extraordinary work. The documentation alone is museum quality. We'd like to create a permanent exhibit in your father's name. The Bradford collection, A Diplomat's Eye. Would you allow us to do that?" I closed my eyes, saw my father's face. Remembered him carefully cataloging each piece, telling me morally about the places he'd been, the history he'd witnessed. "Yes," I said. "He'd like that. There's one more thing. The collection's estimated value. We've completed our own authentication. It sits cents higher than Mr. Chen's initial appraisal, closer to $3.8 million. Mrs. Patterson, your family sold a Smithsonian quality collection for $50. That's almost unfathomable." It's exactly what I've been trying to tell everyone, I said quietly. It was never duck. It was never clutter. It was history. Legacy. Proof that my family mattered. Your family mattered. Your father mattered. And now, because you fought to protect his legacy, thousands of people will learn from his collection. That's beautiful, Mrs. Patterson. That's a kind of victory that transcends the courtroom. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, Robert's favorite vintage, the one I'd been saving, and I toasted my father, my husband, the legacy they'd left behind, and that I'd fought to protect. The battle was over, but the story wasn't finished yet. 8 months after the trial, Emma knocked on my door. She'd grown, still 7, but taller, her face more serious than any 7-year-old should be. Her Aunt Rebecca stood behind her on the porch, looking uncomfortable. Emma wanted to see you, Rebecca said. I told her I'd bring her if you were well. I looked at my granddaughter, saw the uncertainty in her eyes, the fear that I might turn her away because of what her parents had done. Come in, sweetheart, I said, opening the door wide. Rebecca declined to enter, said she'd wait in the car. Probably worried I'd sue her too, though she'd done nothing wrong. The family dynamics had shattered completely. Everyone choosing sides, everyone afraid of saying the wrong thing. Emma walked through my house slowly, looking at the partially restored rooms. Some of my items had been recovered. David Chen had tracked down many buyers and negotiated returns. The Smithsonian had purchased several pieces at fair market value, providing funds for restoration. Insurance had covered some losses, but the house still felt emptier than before. Grandma, Emma said quietly, are Mommy and Daddy in jail because of you? I sat down on the couch, patted the space beside me. She climbed up, and I put my arm around her tiny shoulders. Your Mommy and Daddy are in jail because they broke the law. They took things that belonged to me and sold them without permission. Do you understand what stealing is? Taking something that's not yours. Exactly. And even though they're my son and daughter-in-law, even though I love them, what they did was still stealing, and stealing has consequences. They said they were helping you. Sometimes people convince themselves that doing something wrong is actually helping, but taking away someone's belongings without asking, forcing them to leave their home, selling things that matter to them, that's not helping. That's controlling, and it's not okay to control other people, even if you think you know what's best for them. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Do you hate them? No, baby. I don't hate them. I'm very, very disappointed, and I'm hurt, but I don't hate them. Do you hate me? My heart broke. Emma, no, never. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. She started crying then, the scared, confused tears of a child whose world had been torn apart by adult decisions she couldn't control or understand. I held her while she cried, stroked her hair, whispered the things I'd whispered to Marcus when he was little. You're safe. You're loved. Everything's going to be okay. When she'd calmed down, she looked up at me. Can I tell you something? Anything. I miss the attic. I miss the stories you told me about the coins and the teacups. I miss learning about all the places Grandpa went. Mommy and Daddy said those things were junk, but I didn't think they were junk. I thought they were treasure. I felt tears sting my own eyes. They were treasure, Emma. You saw what your parents couldn't. You understood what they didn't. Will you tell me the stories again? Would you like that? She nodded eagerly. So I did. I told her about my father's time in London, about the Victorian brooch that was now in the Smithsonian. I told her about the Swiss military watch, about the soldiers who'd worn it, about the history it represented. I told her about my mother's teacups, about each country they came from, about the adventures that brought them home. And Emma listened with the same rapt attention she'd always had, the same genuine interest in history and stories and things that mattered. Rebecca knocked after an hour. Time to go. Emma hugged me tight. Grandma, when Mommy and Daddy come home, will everything be okay again? I don't know, sweetheart. Some things that get broken are hard to fix, but I'll always be your grandma. That won't change. You can visit me whenever you want, with your aunt's permission, of course. After they left, I sat in the quiet house and thought about the future. Marcus and Diane would be out in 12 months with good behavior. They declared bankruptcy. The house was gone. The cars repossessed. Their credit destroyed. They'd have to rebuild from nothing. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me wondered if I'd gone too far, if the punishment exceeded the crime. But then I remembered standing at Meadowbrook, watching my life be sold for $37.27. Remembered the humiliation, the dismissal, the way they'd called me a hoarder, a burden, a problem to be solved. And I knew I'd done what I had to do. 6 months later, Marcus called from prison. I'd put him on my approved visitors list, but hadn't gone to see him. Wasn't ready for that yet, but I accepted the call. "Mom," his voice was rough, older. "How are you?" "I'm well. The house is getting back to normal. The Smithsonian opened the exhibit last month. It's beautiful, Marcus. Your grandfather's legacy, preserved for generations." Silence. "Then I should have listened to you." "Yes, you should have. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about why I did it. Mom, I was so sure I was right. So convinced that you were declining, that your judgment was failing, that I needed to save you from yourself. And I never stopped to consider that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong." "Why?" I asked. "Why were you so certain I was incompetent?" "Because you were old." "That sounds terrible, but it's the truth. I looked at you and saw someone who needed to be managed, not someone who deserved to be respected. And I think I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of you dying alone in that house. Scared of not being there when you needed me. So I tried to control the situation before it controlled me." It was the most honest he'd been in years. "Marcus, I was never incompetent. I was just old. And old isn't the same as incapable. I needed support, not control. I needed you to trust me, not override me. If you'd really asked what I needed, what would help, I would have told you. We could have worked together. Instead, you decided for me. And that destroyed everything. I know that now. Too late, but I know it." "What happens when you get out?" I asked. "I don't know. Diane and we're not good right now. This broke us in ways I don't think we can fix. Emma's with Rebecca, who's doing a good job but resents us for putting her in this position. I'll need to find work, rebuild credit, figure out how to be a father from a position of complete failure." He laughed bitterly. "At least I'll have plenty of time to practice humility." "Emma visited me," I said. "She did?" She asked me to tell her the stories again. "About the collections. She said she never thought they were junk." Marcus's voice broke. "She's smarter than her father. She's a child who was never taught to dismiss people based on age. Maybe that's the one thing you did right. You didn't teach her your prejudices." We talked for another 10 minutes. Awkward, painful, but real. More real than we'd been in years. When we hung up, I didn't feel forgiveness exactly, but something softer than anger, maybe understanding, maybe the beginning of something that could eventually become healing. A year after the trial, the Smithsonian held a gala for the opening of the expanded exhibit, the Bradford Collection, a diplomatic legacy. Now included educational materials, interactive displays, and a full catalog of every piece my father had collected. I attended, wearing my mother's pearls. One of the few pieces that had been in my bedroom, and thus survived the garage sale. David Chen escorted me, and we walked through the exhibit together, reading the placards that told my father's story. Diplomat Samuel Bradford spent 40 years in international service, using his position to acquire not just beautiful objects, but pieces of cultural significance that told the story of the nations he served in. His collection represents more than personal taste. It represents a lifetime of cross-cultural understanding and preservation of history. I stood in front of the Victorian brooch, my $340,000 piece that Marcus sold for $5, and read its description. This exquisite brooch, commissioned by Garrod Jewelers in 1887, represents the height of Victorian craftsmanship. The natural sapphires and hand-wrought gold settings survived 2 world wars, passed through 3 generations, and was nearly lost when the owner's family sold it at a garage sale for $5. Its rescue and authentication became a national news story about the importance of recognizing and preserving family heirlooms. Nearly lost, but not lost. Saved because I'd fought. Preserved because I'd refused to let Marcus's dismissal become the final word on my father's legacy. A young woman approached me, probably mid-20s, wearing museum credentials. "Mrs. Patterson? I'm Sarah Chen, David's daughter. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For fighting. My grandmother is 83. My aunt was trying to move her into memory care, saying she was confused and couldn't live alone. But Grandma's not confused. She's just old. And after your case made national news, my mother sat down with my aunt and said, 'We're not doing this. We're not becoming those people.' Grandma's still in her home, living independently, thriving. Because you showed us what happens when families dismiss their elders." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Your grandmother is lucky to have you. We're all lucky you stood up for yourself. You changed the conversation about elder rights. That matters." After the gala, I drove home to my Victorian house. It was quieter now, less full, but mine, my sanctuary, my history. Emma was coming over on Saturday. Weekly visits had become routine, with Rebecca's grudging approval. We'd go to the library, maybe the park, definitely get ice cream. I'd tell her more stories, maybe start teaching her about curation, about preservation, about why things matter beyond their monetary value. Marcus would be out in 6 months, Diane in 3. I didn't know what our relationship would look like then, if we'd rebuild, if they'd try, if I'd let them. But I knew this. I'd survived. I'd fought. I'd won not just in court, but in the bigger battle. The battle for respect, for autonomy, for the right to be believed. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Coffee tomorrow. Want to discuss a new project." "What kind of project?" "Elder rights advocacy. Speaking engagements. Maybe a book. You've become a voice for a lot of people, Betty. Time to use that voice more widely." I smiled, typed back, "Coffee at 10. My treat. For 68 years, I'd been someone's daughter, then someone's wife, then someone's mother. For 4 years after Robert died, I'd been trying to figure out who I was as just myself. And now I knew. I was Betty Patterson, collector, curator, fighter, survivor. A woman who'd been dismissed, stolen from, and nearly erased, but who'd refused to disappear. A woman who'd stood her ground when everyone told her to surrender. A woman who'd chosen dignity over peace. I was enough. Just as I was. Just as I'd always been. And anyone who couldn't see that, family or otherwise, didn't deserve access to my life. I'd spent 72 years learning that lesson. But once learned, it changed everything. The house was quiet. My collections, what remained of them, sat on their shelves. My father's legacy was preserved in the Smithsonian. Robert's workbench still held his tools. My mother's pearls rested in their box. And I was home. Not in an institution someone else chose. Not in a facility someone else decided I needed. But in my house, my space, my life. They'd tried to take that from me, to sell it for pocket change, to dismiss it as junk. But they'd failed, because I'd fought back, and I'd won.